right, everybody, good morning. It is a beautiful morning. I'm pretty sure I got some good sleep. I have not checked my phone yet. So we shall see. All right, we're going to get a little bit deep and dark in this morning episode. And I'm going to be going into the subject that I want to talk more about because I don't see anyone else talking about it in the way I talk about it with the experience I have with it. I've talked in other vlogs and episodes about how I was abused when I was a kid. I'm going to see if I can find the video. Link to vid about past. The main thing that would happen was when my mom felt like she didn't have the attention or validation she needed for being a good mother, she would find a reason to take me to the hospital, get the doctor to diagnose me with something, and then revel in how amazing she was as a mother because she was taking care of me. Now, of course, every child gets sick. Some of the time I was actually sick. But when I was actually sick, so I know a lot of people who have similar situations, their caretaker or their parent would actually induce the sickness. For physical ailments, I don't have any memory of my mom doing that, and I don't think she did. But when it comes to mental ailments, my mom would gaslight me into believing I had the mental ailment like ADHD or OCD or anything really. It didn't really matter as long as she could take me to a psychologist and get me diagnosed. And she would cherry pick a psychologist or a psychiatrist that would diagnose me with something and prescribe me with something. Most of them would say I'm fine. She would have to go to several. She would take me to several until one of them said I was fine. And she's like, see, I knew you were sick, and I'm such an amazing caretaker because I took you to I stuck with you until you found it. And in the end, giving me medication that screwed up my body in very horrible ways and fucked with my confidence, telling me that I'd always be dependent on chemicals, that I'd always need medication, and that I'd never be independent. And then controlling me through that. She put me in a group home. My dad, unfortunately, agreed. My dad was kind of passive during all this. And she put me in a group home when I was 15 to when I was 18. And after I was 18, I didn't realize I could be free because for my whole life I had been controlled by my parents' decisions, mostly my mom, really, because my dad would usually just go with what she said. And controlled me through that to but she gaslit me into believing I was dependent my whole life. So I didn't realize I could make my own decisions. And she put me in a living skills program in Florida, which was essentially like a halfway house sort of, that I didn't need, of course. And eventually when I was 22, I broke out of it. Not like literally, but like I broke out of the funk with the help of my therapist at the time, realizing what was going on. And grew out of it, but I had to get off my medication first, which was a fucking hell hole. I will talk about that at some point. I have, and I will, but the subject of today's, because I have experience living in a toxic family. I haven't said everything that was toxic about it because that's a whole video or two in itself, but I have experience having toxic parents and having emotional and mental abuse and having that and breaking out of that and being gaslit into believing that I was dependent my whole life and believing it and then breaking out of that. I have that experience, and I think there's a lot of people who are looking for a guide for how to, either as an adult or as a young adult or as like an older adult, how do I break free from these mental chains that I was given, even if my parents are dead, maybe, or even if they're not in my life, or even if they are in my life. If I'm like 25 or 30 and my parents are still controlling me and I don't know how to stop it, I don't know how to break free, I don't know how to set boundaries with my family, maybe keep them in my life, maybe not. That's another decision for another time. That's another topic. But How do I break free of these mental chains that my parents put on me and build an awesome life that I love, despite the fact that I grew up from this shitty start, right? And I have a lot of experience in that, and I would say, an experiential expert. Excuse me. I want to start talking about that. So today's topic is, was I abused, or am I just being a millennial? And the reason I say that, being a millennial, is because you hear a lot of people say, like, oh, when I was a kid, that was just called parenting, like referring to like paddling or like smacking their kids. You're just being a sensitive millennial. And there is something to be said for that, because I do know a lot of millennials, not a lot, but like nowadays compared to early 1900s, or like compared to like mid 1900s, we have a lot of luxuries that they don't have. And everybody's trauma, if you will, if you ask anybody, like, what's the worst thing that happened in your life, everybody will have an answer. And if you've had a good life, the worst thing that happened in your life would be not that bad compared to people from 50 years ago. People from 50 years ago will probably say a lot worse things happen in their life than you, for most people. Not everybody. People still have hard lives today. I've had a hard life. Yes, financially, well, I was going to say financially my family was always well off, but that's not completely true. But I've had experiences that a lot of people haven't had. And so if I didn't talk about the mental and emotional abuse that I've went through, I could easily say, yeah, like my grandparents took me to France for 2 weeks when I was a teenager because they wanted me to see the world, and my mom put me in camp, day camp in the summer, and we had a great time. And I could talk only about the good things, and people would say, like, wow, you had an amazing life. And then I'd be sit there thinking, like, was I really abused, or am I just being fucking sensitive? And that's a valid question. I think that's a question you need to ask yourself, because I think there are people in the world who they are looking only at the negative in their lives, and they say, oh, I was abused, because it makes them feel important, especially in today's culture of needing to have some kind of ailment to feel like you're special. Hold on a second. I think there is a glorification, a romanticization of victimhood in some parts of today's culture. The oppression Olympics, if you will, that kind of thing. And I think it's important to not fall into that. So it's an important question to ask yourself if you think you were abused. At the same time, I know for myself, even now, this truth of, like, I was abused, this truth is a bitter fucking pill to swallow. And it took me a long time to accept it. And it took me an even longer time to keep it down. I kept trying to spit it back up metaphorically. I kept trying to be like, well, you know what? Maybe I thought that I was, but blah, blah, blah. Or maybe I thought that I was, but, like, look at this thing that my mom did. That was great for me. Maybe I thought that I was, but, like, yeah, like, my dad tried to stand up for me. Or, like, look, maybe, like, I was actually sick. Maybe I needed to be on this medication, or blah, blah, blah. And that's me spitting back up that dark truth, because that's a hard fucking truth to really swallow. And so it's this balance. You have to be like, okay, was I really abused? Because I might just be kidding myself. I might just be feeding into this glorification of, like, oh, if I was abused, that would explain so much. That would explain, like, a lot. Like, even for me, as I was believing as I was learning about my past from a different perspective, because as I would tell people about my past, they'd be like, and this is actually the solution, I'll get to that, of how to answer this question. As I was learning about my past, I started to, like, romanticize the idea that I was sexually abused. I have no memories of being sexually abused, and I have no real, like, links. I don't really have any evidence, and I don't think I was. But the thing is, I started to, like, kind of get this idea that I was, because it was kind of like, oh, well, I know I was abused, like, I must have been this too. Like, it was like, oh, it was kind of romanticized in in popular culture, it was so much attention on people who are sexually abused. There's like so much attention on it that it's like, oh, well, if I am, then that would explain so much. And life would be super simple. Like all this anger and pain that I would feel, it would be justified. But the truth is, I was abused in a different way. And this other way is more complicated, and there's not really much attention being put on it. It's not as glamorous. And so the easy thing for my mind to go to was like, oh, you were sexually abused because, I don't know, that would just make sense. It would just make all your emotions make sense. So let's just say that. But it's not true. So it's a really important thing to ask yourself. Really fucking important. Did this actually happen? And is it true? And is it as bad as I think it is? But it's also, again, you don't want to, as you're realizing these things, you don't want to question yourself too much, because if you question yourself too much, then it's already hard enough to swallow that bitter pill of the truth, because you don't want to think that you were abused, because then you have to question your family, and then you have to question your whole past. And that was a hard process for me. So it's this weird balance of like, let's be realistic and objective, but also let's not punch yourself while you're down. Like if you're already starting to realize this, it's so hard of a truth to realize and internalize. It's a dichotomy you have to figure out. The solution here is to talk to people about it, and talk to people that are rational and reasonable. I think talking to people in a support group is great. But the issue with support group is that they're just going to be super supportive no matter what. And if you say like, they might give you some real feedback, but I don't think that you'll get a lot of good real feedback from support group, because their job is to make you feel good, is to help you with your emotions. And emotions are like, well, if this is what you're feeling, let's help you with that. And so I wouldn't go to a support group and be like, was I abused or was I not? Because they might be like, yeah, girl, you were abused, or like whatever, because that would be supportive to just go along with your narrative. I would say maybe to a therapist or a close friend, but people you think are rational. I don't know about close friends, because they wouldn't necessarily, you have to pick and choose. But talk about it with people that you trust, give you rational and real feedback. And if you're like, hey, like for me, for instance, for a while, I just thought that what my parents did, especially my mom, was normal. I'm like, okay, yeah, most moms do that. Most moms take you to a hospital and get you diagnosed with things, and like make sure that they find the right doctor to get the diagnosis and to get you a bunch of medication, and they tell you that you're gonna be dependent your whole life. Like that's most moms, right? But the more I talked about it, the more I realized that that was a very unique experience, and it was a very demoralizing experience, and it was a very and she gaslit me. She would specifically tell me I would always need medication, and that I would never be normal, and she would take advantage of my vulnerability. So, and it created problems for me in relationships going forward, because I protect myself from girls now. Like I have a very thick skin, and I act like a scared puppy, like a rescue puppy, if you will. If you get close, you try to pet a puppy, it'll like yap at you, it'll like bark at you and try to get you to go away because it's scared. And that's how I react with intimacy. And all these clues and the feedback that I would get taught me that, hey, like this isn't a normal thing that your mom did to you. This isn't normal. Your mom isn't supposed to like tell you that you're going to be dependent all the time. Your mom isn't supposed to like cut down all your attempts to be independent. Your mom isn't supposed to, every time you get angry at her, she'll say it's time to go to the hospital because you're not acting right, and put it back on you and gaslight you into believing that your anger means that you're crazy, because it challenges her belief that she's a good mom. It's not normal. And only from talking to other people about it did over and over again, my friends, the people I trust, and my therapist, did I realize that, hey, like your mom was she was abusing you, and that's fucked up, and you don't have to put up with that. So the solution here to the question, was I really abused, or am I just being a millennial, is talk to people about it. I hope this helped you out. Again, I want to talk about this more because I have intimate experience with it. I don't see other people talking about this subject in a way that is like actionable and helpful and supportive of people who are adults who have had traumatic past and abusive past and are trying to break out and build their own life despite coming up in fucking chaos. My current one of my current missions is to become financially abundant. Another one of my current missions is to I've been able to go out and have a bunch of sex, which is great. I'm really happy about that. I have a bunch of sexual experience that make me happy, but it's been hard for me to build intimacy and trust with women. Very, 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 very hard for obvious reasons. I just told you about my past. It's very hard for me to build that. And that's my current goal. I've come a long way from where I was. I continue to come a long way to be able to trust and just sit there with women even though these protection mechanisms are trying to get me to push them away. But that's what I'll be talking about because it's a journey I'm going through. And just different aspects of this, how to grow out of a traumatic past. Please subscribe if you want to hear more of that. I'm excited to talk a lot about the things that I like a lot because for a lot of the videos, like I'm talking about something that I know about, maybe tangentially, or maybe like I've heard a lot about, or maybe I have some experience in, but it's either something that a lot of other people have talked about or I'm not an expert in. And so I feel kind of like I have imposter syndrome. But this, and a lot of that is just internally because I really do know a lot about certain things that I've been talking about. It's just like my mind hasn't caught up. But this specifically, I know a lot about, and I know that's a very unique situation. Not a lot of people can talk about the things that, like this subject about being abused and growing out of it, but I can. So wish you the best. Please subscribe if this is helpful. And there's a bunch of links in the description below for products on Amazon that are affiliate links for me that would help me a ton. If you want any of those products or anything similar, click on that. Buy whatever you want on Amazon. It gives me a commission, and that helps me put a lot more energy and effort into YouTube. Wishing you the best. Goodbye.